Hi, everyone. My name is Winnie, and I would like to welcome all viewers to Thrive on Burden's first live session. Today's session is part one of our discussion on diversity and inclusion. The deaths of George Floyd and many others have again sparked an outcry against police brutality and have put issues on racial injustice and systemic racism, white supremacy, and so forth on the forefront of everyone's minds. We are angry and we want change. It also feels overwhelmingly that people are tired. I personally feel exhausted. I see a lot of people having conversations and posting things on social media, dismissing the emotions of people of color, and beyond that, trying to control how people of color express their emotions. While I do not condone violence, I want to point out that a lot of the raw emotions we are seeing from the majority of people of color are a result of systemic racial injustice and inequalities that are deeply rooted in this country's history of white supremacy and slavery. Incidents of police brutality against people of color absolutely put these issues in our faces. But I can guarantee you that people of color, especially Black people, regardless of their background and socioeconomic status, experience some form of discrimination and prejudice, whether overtly or through microaggressions fairly regularly because of their skin color. There continues to be so much animosity and division in our society that sometimes it feels like there's no hope. I was so encouraged when the guests that I invited to participate in today's discussion responded eagerly and were excited to be a part of this conversation. They did not want any background information about each other before deciding to participate in this discussion today. And that gave me hope. Hope that we can have respectful dialogues that can lead to change. With that said, I would like to formally welcome and thank my guests for being here today. Welcome, Kim and Danny. I am so appreciative of you guys being here today. So
Thank you
because
for having us.
Yes,
yeah,
thank you.
thank you guys so much. So because I wanted this conversation to be authentic, I did not share with my guests my specific talking points or questions that I will address in this discussion. My hope is that today's conversation will spark some ideas on how we can become more inclusive in our personal and professional lives, and what we as individuals and collectively can do to bring about systemic change in our communities. I would like to invite you, our viewers, to participate in this conversation as well. So feel free to drop your thoughts in the comments. So to kickstart today's discussion, I'm going to share a quick couple examples of microaggressions that I experienced that were solely based on biases. So a couple years ago when we moved to Missouri, I remember starting my job there. It must have been a few days later after I started working there, and I was sitting in a meeting with a coworker. Since I was new, she started a conversation with me and asked me about the origins of my last name. I told her, and she responded with, "You don't look like a poor Haitian to me." A couple years later, I was going home from work one afternoon, and as I was leaving, there was a family in the waiting area waiting to visit with one of the residents. I said hi and checked in with the parent to see if they had already talked with the staff because I wanted to make sure they were helped before I left. Good
Mhm.
customer service, right? So, as I was talking to the parent, one of the kids who was with her blurted out to me, "Why don't you go back to where you came from?"
Hmm.
That was surprising to me, but what surprised me the most was the fact that this child's parent did not correct her right away. As a child, I could never talk to an adult that way because my parents would pop me
Mhm.
pretty much. But that day, is it was already 5 o'clock and I was really tired. And I just didn't have the energy to engage in that conversation. So I just shook my head and left. There's a lot more examples like that I could share. But I want to hear from my guests because that's why I invited you guys here today to be a part of this conversation. So to start the conversation, I am going to ask you guys this first question. Have you ever experienced discrimination, whether directly or indirectly, because of your racial background or gender? If you have, please give some examples and tell us a little bit about what that experience was like for you.
Yes, I can go first if you like. So being a military spouse, I got married at 19, moved to Southern California, and there it's a melting pot. It's nothing like how it is in the Midwest. And there, let's see, I remember working at a major bank in Laguna Beach, and they have a large Persian population. And growing up in the Midwest, I'd never been around Persians. And they were so beautiful, and just their attire and the jewelry and everything. Like, I just wanted to learn more about them. A lot of my coworkers were Persian and stuff like that. But on the holidays, they give crisp, brand new dollar bills to all their family members. And I was like, oh, that's cool, but they have to be brand new. They have to be like freshly printed straight out of the vault. And they wouldn't come to my window. And I thought that was weird. I was like, okay. And I was like, oh, maybe they're friends with my coworker who was Persian. I was like, that's fine. I don't care, but after a few times it happened, eventually they'd come up to my window and be like, no, I want to see this one because I don't want you to see what's in my bank account. And I'd be like, I'm like, okay, I'm all polite, I'm 19, 20 years old, so sweet and timid back then. And I was like, oh, okay, they can help you. I don't mind. I'll work on the next customer. But then I got to thinking, I was like, okay, well, they don't realize that I can, just look up their name and see, what's in their account, like my coworker could. So I thought that was kind of odd. And then also being out in California, I realized that like my college degrees didn't really matter because I didn't speak another language. Mm-hmm. So I'd have other coworkers that would make more than me without a college degree. And I was so confused on that because in school, you're told get a degree, that's how you're going to advance in the world and everything like that. You're not really in the Midwest, really, you're not really told, that you need to learn another language like that. But out there it's super beneficial because half their population almost, and especially in Southern California, there's so many different cultures and languages, and that's a bit more beneficial to a company than a college degree. So at first I was like, okay, that's a little different, so I mean, my examples aren't as extreme, but still it made me kind of step back and be like, oh, okay, it made me kind of evaluate some things. Later on, a few years ago, we got stationed in Hawaii. And so, everyone thinks Hawaii is so beautiful. And there, it was a different world because they're newly a part of the United States and they don't like it. Back in, I want to say the 50s and 60s, like they were forced to become part of the United States. And from what I've learned, it was not a happy thing at all. So they don't really care for tourists, no matter what their skin color or what their country they're from. If they are not Pacific Islander, they do not like you at all. And they make it known there too. They have this thing which you can Google, which is called Kill Haole Day, which is Haole, I believe is how you spell it. And it happens in May or June, the end of the school year, and they will go around and target tourists, anyone that is not Pacific Islander. And it's a real thing. And it actually happened to us. We were walking into a restaurant and this guy is just driving around the parking lot, screaming and yelling at us. And the guy at the door was like, you need to get inside right now. And he told us what to Google. And he's like, this week is that time. And we were like, holy cow. Like we had no idea that Hawaii, because all you see on the news is how beautiful and fun and exciting it is there. And it, so people don't realize like it is widespread,
Mhm. Mhm.
no matter what your background is.
Mhm. Thank you, Kim.
Of course.
Well, for me, I guess I kind of tune. I've lived in a bubble of somewhat blocking certain experiences out of my mind, kind of compensating for something that may be discrimination because of my race or me being a woman. I tend to, I think we're kind of conditioned this way sometimes to kind of block certain things out and not just take them for what they are. Quickly, one vivid memory I have of an experience is not too long ago, earlier this year. Sometimes on my way to work, I'll stop in the grocery store to pick up something for people in the office, or if I need a bottle of water, or just feel like I'm having something different, I'll stop and I'll pick up um, an item. I was at the register and someone in front of me was leaving. The woman turns around and she's looking around for something and she starts staring at me. And I said, "Are you missing something?" And she starts speaking to the cashier and she says, "I can't find my wallet." So I continue, watching her ring up my stuff, and she's putting my items in the bag. And now I prepare to go into my purse to pay for my stuff. She looks me in my eyes and she says, "Do you have it?"
Wow.
I said, "Excuse me?" She said, "Do you have my wallet?" Before I could get the next word out, I immediately felt like this rush of heat on my body
Mhm.
because this was a moment where I'm like, no, this is actually happening. I'm being accused of something um, that I did not do. And I think there was a level of comfort in um, in her eyes. Like you can tell certain things when they're happening by looking at someone's eyes, and the look on her face. I'm a Black person.
Mhm.
I'm possibly guilty of this, and she's, if anyone is, I am. It wasn't until the cashier spoke for me. I didn't have a moment to really get my words together. I don't think anything nice was going to come out of my mouth. I'm going to be honest with you.
Mhm.
I've never been accused of anything that close to my face. Maybe behind my back, people have done it. But the cashier said, "No, there's absolutely no way she has your wallet. She just got here." Um, and she's like, "Well, she can check in her purse." And I'm like, "Why would I check in my purse for something that I don't have?" And I started to feel like if you absolutely need to look so that I can prove you wrong, I'll dump it out.
Mhm.
Um, but the lady kept speaking for me, and she was like, "No, she doesn't need to do any of that because there's no way." In the next breath, the person at the customer service desk says, "Your wallet is here. You left it over here." And there was no sorry. There was no remorse for accusing someone. It was kind of a chuckle, and she just said, "Oh, okay," and went about her day. And for me, it was just a reminder that these things happen. You know, there are people who will look at you and the way you're dressed, the color of your skin, if you have an accent, just because you have an accent, they will look at you. And, in your situation, your example, Kim, you were in a place that does not like other people coming into their areas. You're just a tourist. There are people who thrive off of not having any diversity, not not accepting to anything that is not their norm.
Mhm.
And I realized that day that, whoa, this is, maybe I don't feel it every day, but this is something that's real, and it's not something that I'm able to tune out all the time. As Winnie started off her, the stream, she mentioned, the things that have been going on in the world, how they're affecting us, and really, it's put myself even in a place, I'm typically a quiet person when it comes to certain things, even things that happen to me personally. I kind of, like I said, I've dusted it off and said, you know what, maybe that's how it went, and maybe I'm blowing it out of proportion. But something like that experience was so vivid to me. It was so obvious what was happening. I couldn't put it off as, no, she just, she's just having a bad morning.
Mhm.
She really felt what she was saying. The accusation that she threw out was how she felt, and she was comfortable in looking at me. Maybe my hair, I wear my hair in dreads, maybe my hair, maybe I didn't have makeup on that day and I didn't look like someone who was presentable. Whatever the reason was that made her feel that I was capable of that thing,
Mhm.
she was quick to go with that narrative. And it just goes to show that, yes, sometimes it's our sex, we're women, and then other times it's what we look like, to someone who just doesn't care for someone who looks like that. So
Right. And as I listened to you guys talking, I was definitely experiencing different kinds of emotions. Kim, for you, it was kind of like this, oh my gosh, like this is something that you experienced as well. And hearing you, Donnie, like I was also experiencing some of the anger and some of the heat, that you mentioned you started
mhm.
in your body. So I'm curious to hear from both of you guys. Like when you see these things happening to other people, or they're happening to you, or even sitting here, listening to each other, what's your reaction?
I pride myself of typically wanting to stand up for the underdog. you know, um, I'm like this within my family. I'm like this with my friends. I'm a right is right and wrong is wrong kind of person. So I don't particularly care to see anybody going through anything that could cause them harm, whether it be emotionally, physically. I tend to want to protect. So listening to Kim say that, I've been to Hawaii. I'm not sure what part of Hawaii you were in, but I've been to Hawaii. Obviously, for you living there, it's more than the week that 7 days that I spent there. Our experiences will definitely be different. But as a tourist, again, maybe those things were happening. You know what I mean? Maybe they had these looks at, they were making these faces at me and my husband, that we were just so immersed in the fact that we had just got married, we were on our honeymoon, that we couldn't even feel or even imagine being displaced. I mean, we went on a tour and we're with all these other tourists. So we felt like, okay, this is the thing to do. This is what happens here. But I could imagine possibly spending time as a local and having a completely different experience, knowing that I don't look like these people. So I definitely can sympathize and empathize with you feeling like I have no choice but to be here. I didn't pack up myself and move here. You know what I mean? This is where were assigned as a military, as part of the military, and it hurts to know that. It's a reminder that it's not just one sided. We as Black people, we experience things. We as women, we experience things. I'm not naive to believe that no one else experiences anything that is wrong. But to actually listen to you tell a story, it's a reminder that there are moments where somebody else can be, like you might go to China or Japan or wherever, and these people look at you and don't care either way. You're not one of them. Get out of here. We don't want you here. And to hear that these people go around and they're attacking tourists, that's scary.
Yeah.
It's scary,
Yeah,
Yeah.
because whenever we lived there, it would be in the news all the time because we were on Oahu, where Waikiki and Honolulu is, but that's where all the military bases are. I think there's an army base on the Big Island where the volcano is, but you'd hear it on Maui and Kauai that the locals would just come up to your campsite and be like, "You need to leave," even though you've rented it and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Then in base housing, we'd have a lot of friends that, because there it was really weird. The base housing isn't really fenced off. Anyone can come on the base housing. The bases are all fenced off with gate guards and stuff, but almost all the housing is not. And there'd be a local, a Hawaiian, sitting in people's backyards or picking their avocado trees or orange trees or whatever. And it's, a lot of the moms, they're home alone all day with their kids, so they'd be terrified calling the, MPs or whatever. And the MPs would come and confront the person sitting in the backyard and be like, "This is mine. This is my land. This is mine.
Wow.
I have the right to pick this stuff." So it's very confusing like that. And then, because I like what you said, like it's kind of scary, and I want to protect people like that too. And I remember my next door neighbor, they were Mexican American, and she had heard all the horror stories. She had 2 little kids that were going to the elementary school, and she thought, since her kids, they're half Mexican, that they had the darker skin and the dark eyes and the dark hair, that they blend in and they look Hawaiian, but they didn't. Her daughter was probably about 8 and would cry every single morning going to school because she was terrified. It's crazy, and you just want to, for babies to experience that stuff is just so heartbreaking because they don't really understand. They haven't lived long enough to, I guess, understand the history or why people are the way they are. So that's just it. It was heartbreaking to hear, the children experiencing that kind of stuff too.
I agree.
There was something that Diney said that I wanted to piggyback off of. You mentioned, how when you and Stanley went to Hawaii as guests, and tourists, some of the things that Kim is talking about were stuff that you wouldn't have been aware of because, of course, like, you don't live there. So that brought up a thought for me, how oftentimes, there are things going on around us that we don't necessarily see because we are not in the situation, but that doesn't mean that those things aren't happening. Because one thing that I hear a lot, especially when things like George Floyd's murder and all these different men, who have been murdered by the police, when these things are happening, I hear a lot of people saying, well, why are people protesting? Why are people doing these things? Why don't people just, get over it, get over slavery, get over those things? And people don't necessarily realize that a lot of the racial injustice that people are protesting is not just because of police brutality. Yes, police brutality puts a headlight on it. There's a focus on those things, but on a daily basis, we experience a lot of discrimination that other people may not see because it's not affecting them. So this kind of leads me to my next question for you guys is, what does privilege, specifically white privilege, mean to you? And Kim, I'm not sure if this is a term that you've heard about, but this is kind of one of these terms that comes up a lot when I'm having conversations about race and these types of things with people. It's white privilege. So what does that mean to you? And do you recognize it? And if you do, what does that look like for you? And I'd also like to hear from you as well, Dani.
Okay.
So Kim, you
wants
can
to
go
start?
first.
Who? Me?
Kim.
Okay. Well, for me, like, I grew up poor. And yes, my skin color is white, but I grew up poor. No one in my family went to college. Everyone was farmers. They just got a trade. They went straight to work, worked very, very hard for a living. And whenever I graduated high school, my parents don't have money to send me to college, so I knew I wanted to get out of the small town America. I just couldn't handle it. I wanted to go and experience the world and be around different people and travel and learn things. And so, I just went to, Missouri has a thing where it's the A+ program where they provide, 2 years free schooling as long as you have like a decent GPA and do community service, that kind of deal. So I took advantage of that. I was like, okay, this is going to get my foot in the door to at least go to college. And so I did that. And then that's whenever I figured out what I wanted to do in life with my degrees. And, it got me out of the Midwest and the small town thinking, because that irritates me. And so it got me around all sorts of different cultures. I have so many great friends that are just, from all over the world. And so what I believe is that, as long as you work hard, everyone has the same chances in life. And as long as you do work hard and, set your goals and, do what you can to meet those goals, everyone has those same experiences. And a lot of my friends from here in my hometown are like, oh, you're so lucky you got out of here. And I'm like, you have a car. You can get out of this situation that you're in. Here there's a lot of people that, they don't make very much money. There's a lot of drugs, a lot of violence and stuff like that. And I'm like, you have the same, options to be able to leave and, have a better life for your family and for yourself. So for the white privilege part, like we didn't really hear much of that because we have, even though we're a small rural area, we did have a lot of other people that weren't necessarily all white, so we all fed off each other and learned off of each other. And so that term never was brought up as us being kids until, the last few years or something with all the cop violence and everything going on.
So when you hear somebody talking about white privilege and they bring it up, what is the reaction that you have, and what does that mean to you when you hear someone say, white privilege?
Yeah. Well, for me, I'm still learning the topic, but my first reaction is just like, it hurts that other people are hurting, for that term. It makes me sick, that people just can't go out and do whatever they want, that there are just certain people that think, oh, because your last name is this, or you're from this country, or you look a certain way, that you don't deserve certain things. That just, it breaks my heart. And it shouldn't be like that at all.
I do want to bring in a comment from our viewers before I let Diney talk. And our viewer Bree Joseph says she respects what you're talking about in terms of everyone having similar chances and all of that, but she says, but I do not believe everyone has the same chances in life. There are many factors that plays a role, and race is one of them. So I think that in general, when people talk about white privilege, that's definitely one of the things that comes into play. So, Diney, could you share some of your thoughts on that?
Okay. For me, when I hear white privilege, I immediately, and I'm going to use a story to kind of paint this a little bit. And I've told this story on some other platforms, but it speaks to the term in so many ways. I recently received a promotion at work. I don't have the same level of education as many other people, but I have a long history in what I do. I do it well, and I earned said promotion. A colleague who is fresh out of a master's program has come in. She did her internship with the same organization for about 6 months. she is Caucasian. And she immediately, upon me getting this promotion, goes into a frenzy, and says to me in a private conversation that my family has worked too hard to settle for less. If they do not want to give me a promotion that was promised to me, because allegedly she was promised a promotion when she completed her internship, when she was offered the permanent position, she was told she would get a promotion within 6 months of her being there. She had not been there 6 months yet, but within 6 months of her being there, she would get a promotion. So if they're not going to give her a promotion, she's better than this, she will leave. My response to her was, well, I'm a little confused by what you're saying. You know, I come from a family who has very high standards as well. We've worked hard for what we have and where we want to be in life. And she immediately kind of backed into a shell. I don't think she realized. Well, she probably did realize. I think she was shocked that I would even respond to her. And this is just a personality thing that I've acknowledged with her. But to me, I can't imagine myself saying to someone, almost saying, I'm better than you. My family is better than you because of X, Y, and Z. I think in life, yes. I think in life, on the surface, we have the same opportunities on the surface. It appears that way. This job is posted, you can apply for it, and I can apply for it too. There are still on the back ends of the people who are hiring who may prefer one thing over another. There are people on the back ends who will give me the job but won't pay me half as much as what they would pay my Caucasian counterpart. And I think that is where, and I don't think that everyone understands white privilege. I think it's become, in light of everything going on, and I think us being as African American people, Black people, and Brown people, us being more vocal about our feelings towards these things, I think it comes off as an attack. But I think the part of not knowing is what white privilege is part of, I wouldn't say the problem, but I think that part is very important, because there are places, as you say, where you grew up, where this is not a thing, but there are areas where you live and the CEOs of every single company are white men, white women. You know, if the woman can get there, and your Black and African American counterpart has the same credentials and cannot get their foot in the door, because the people who sit on boards and people who are up at the very top, the executives, don't look like those people. You know, and I think when we have these conversations about, when we're talking about diversity and inclusion, I think those things need to change, because that's when the privilege starts to shine. You know, it's a level of comfort. I think this country was built off of whether it's known to you, or, and I'm just choosing my words, whether it's known to you or not, as a person who's not Black or Brown, there are things that are easier for you to attain and obtain that aren't as easy for us to do. We can go sit in the same classrooms. You know, we can go through the same training, sometimes even more. Sometimes we're doing even more than that. And I think it's just because the way this world is built, you have a step closer, you know? So I do agree I do agree that, you know, if we want change, we want things done, we have to step out and do it. Your advice to the person, you know, people in your town who say you're lucky you've gotten out. You know, we can hear that. We hear that within our own culture that, oh, you've got this nice house, you've got this nice car, you're so lucky. No, I'm still fighting to make it to the absolute top to obtain all the things. And I think even as women, I think it's hard for us to get our foot into some of these doors because these doors are built literally for men to walk through, not for a woman to walk through them. You know, and I think because of those things, sometimes, like I said, white privilege, the term white privilege comes off as we're picking and we're saying that it's not to be mean, it's to point out that we just have a harder time in this world. We really do. And it's not a pity party. It's not to particularly make you feel bad. I like that you said there's a lot that you need to learn. That's you acknowledging that I really versus having catching feelings or being offended or things like that. You've realized that, I need to look into what this means and understand more of what this means when it's said, because from your personal experience, from where you've grown up, where you've lived, that wasn't something that was a norm. I think the term itself is fairly new. We're using it more frequently these days, but I think the concept of life being significantly easier for someone who is not Black or brown is where we're getting at when we say you hold a level of white privilege. Not to attack you. It's not to attack you. It's just there's probably a door we walk into at the same time, and the color of your skin, the way you look, just makes you more appealing to that person than me. And in a nutshell, that's what white privilege is to me. It's just as much as we're fighting for equality and we want to say everybody is equal and everyone has the same opportunities, the truth of the matter is it's just not that way. Now there are areas where it's gotten better. I don't know, this person I'm talking to you guys about at my job, she eventually got her promotion. Do I know if she's making 3 times as much as me? I don't know. Now back to when our first topic started, I said sometimes I brush things away. This one is easy for me to brush away. Well, she does have that MBA. I don't have an MBA. We're not doing the same thing. If they're paying her 3 times as much as me, it's, if I look at the job title and I look at pay scale might say she's getting paid 3 times as much as I am, and what I'm doing is different. So I do these things, and again, it's part of how we're conditioned to kind of not make a fuss out of everything. But she fought. She opened up her mouth. I think she eventually got the promotion a lot quicker than they were expecting. They were going to always do it. I don't think it was ever a thing where they were not going to do it. I think there were a lot of things going on in the business that made it take longer than she would have liked them to do. But I think her rage, her rage comes from her feeling like I'm entitled to this. And I think that comes from her level of feeling superior to me because of what she looks like. She can't say the words because I think when you say those words, why is this Black woman getting a promotion before me? Then we trickle into to something else. So this is now we're talking racism. I don't think that you being ignorant of your white privilege automatically makes you racist, but I do believe that there are times where it works hand in hand. And I think in this situation, she may not be racist. I don't know that. To my knowledge, in my faith, she's never done anything to make me feel like she's blatantly racist. But I do feel that she knows that she's got a privilege. She's got an easier way of maneuvering through this world than I do. And I think she used that to her advantage for sure.
Definitely. Thank you to both of you guys so much for sharing these experiences, because I think it's always helpful to hear the different perspectives of what these different terms mean to different people, and to hear, when somebody say specifically, hey, because of privilege, you can't see X, Y, and Z. It's not necessarily an attack or anything. And Kim, I remember having a similar um, not too long ago, where we were talking about, how you and I are two educated women, right? So we can probably walk into the same store at the same time, or walk into a different establishment, at the same time, and someone will look at you, and they will see your car, and they will see the way that you're dressed, and they will just assume that, hey, you worked hard to have your car, you looked hard, you worked hard, so you could have that purse that you have in your hand, and all of these things. And then they can look at me, and they're questioning, how I got to have my car, and how I got to have the purse that I have in my hand. So I think a lot of times it comes down to those things too, when where people look at you because of the way that you look, because of your skin color, they assume things about you without even knowing you personally, and without knowing your background and your history. So my last question to you guys, to kind of wrap up our conversation today, is what can you do, and what are you willing to do towards bridging the racial gap and coming up with solutions to lessen the divide in our society, so that our children can grow up in a better world? How do we work towards being more inclusive?
Well, like I said, in mine is just learning more, about all these new terms and everything like that, that are newer terms. They're not brand new, but, they're cut more on the media and everything, and all over social media and stuff like that, that everyone just needs to learn more. And then I wanted to bring up, like, my husband, he's a retired Marine, and he's detained a lot of terrorist prisoners. And everyone's seen the video of George Floyd. And I was asking my husband, I was like, is that proper for him to have his knee? I mean, I understand maybe a knee for a second to flip him over, or zip tie him, or put a handcuff on him, or something, if it was severe enough to require that. But 8 minutes, not almost 9 minutes worth. And my husband is like, no. He's like, that is what us Marines, not police officers, Marines are trained to do to the Iraqi and the Afghani terrorist. And these people are strapped with bombs, who had just thrown a bomb and killed a whole family, or, whatever, like, that's what you do for terrorists. My husband's like, police officers are supposed to serve and protect their citizens. There's a million different other maneuvers that those police officers could have done for George instead of that. And, to be able to keep himself safe and alive, and listening to his words, like, he couldn't breathe. How many times does he have to say it? Before you roll him over, set him up against the car tire, or, whatever. But so that was very shocking for me to see, for everyone to see that video. And so being able to talk to my husband, who's trained to actually use that kind of force on terrorists, not your own citizens, not your own people, it was just appalling. So definitely more education. And whatever they end up deciding for, like, the police force, like, there's got to be an overhaul of something, whatever they decide, better training, or maybe increase the pay so they get a better population of police officers. I don't know. I know not every police officer is bad, but in the news, it's making it look like, the opposite. So definitely more education of everything, more training, stuff like this, everyone talking about it, being open, sharing your experiences and learning from one another is very, very important.
Absolutely.
I think it's education. I do. I think we as what you're seeing in the media now, you're seeing protests, you're seeing this next generation is not playing. They are ready and willing to do whatever it takes. My nephew posted a video the other day to make these things change. I think that is part of what we need to do to see more diversity, more inclusion, to see more equal rights for Black and Brown people. I think it's going to take us not suppressing our feelings. It doesn't mean that we need to go out and be violent. It doesn't mean that we need to go out. Understand that those are expressions of people being tired and people being hurt. We get angry and we throw things. Some people, if that's where your anger takes you, you might scream, you might yell, you might cry. Those are expressions of your feelings. I don't think that everyone needs to express that way. I think we'd live in a very crazy world if we all resorted to that level of expressing our anger. But I do think we need to make where we stand clear. I posted something earlier today on my Facebook, and ultimately, what I wanted to convey is we've made ourselves so uncomfortable for so long. I keep reciting this thing in my head that we're conditioned to these things. We're conditioned to, as young children, and I have it double fold. I grew up with immigrant Haitian parents in America, and we were conditioned to don't go playing loud music in your car, don't put a Haitian flag in your car, because they were from the part of coming to America where it was a problem for you to be Haitian. The Black Americans didn't like you, the Jamaicans didn't like you, the white people didn't like you. No one liked you because you were Haitian. So we've conditioned ourselves, after Trayvon Martin, we tell our young men, don't go outside with a hoodie on. We've conditioned ourselves so much to make everyone else who doesn't look like us comfortable so that we can be included, so that we could be invited to the cookout, so to say, or, to be accepted in corporate environments and in religious environments. We've conformed to what the world's norms are so that we can be included. I think it's a time now, what you're seeing is where people are like, I don't care if you don't want to include me. I need you to understand why we need to be the same. I need you to understand that you can't give a Black man 20 years in prison and give a white man probation. And we did the same exact thing. Yeah. So while we need diversity when it comes to our politicians. We need more diversity at local level and higher political levels. We need it in our schools. We need it with therapists. We've talked about that, Winnie. And when it comes to therapy and people treating, emotional and mental illnesses, we need to diversify that so that you can, if you are talking to me, you can, from my perspective, through education, through learning, you understand where, if I'm loud, where it comes from, if I'm passionate, where it comes from, versus just labeling me as she's an angry Black woman. So I think inclusion starts with us really taking the time to sit and talk to each other.
Right.
Me as a Black woman being honest about what's been done that's not right, and not being afraid to say it because they're going to look at me like I'm an angry Black woman again. Here I am. I'm the angry Black woman in the room. Not being afraid of those labels that have been placed upon us, and saying, you know what, you need to know. You need to know when what you've done isn't correct. You need to know what you've done, how it's hurt me. And I think also we need to discuss things that are happening in the world, that for so many years we try to bury, and we try to pretend like these things don't happen, and they're alive and well. I mean, what we're seeing right now is an example of like we're literally seeing modern day lynching.
Yeah.
Some people will tell you that, oh, that doesn't happen anymore. You know, thank God for cell phones. Thank God for cell phones. We've got video. I mean, as crazy as it is that someone has to literally pull their phone out and videotape a man run. Well, in this situation, the attacker, Ahmaud Arbery, the attacker is the one recording. Idiot. You know what I mean? Like self-incriminating. But because of cell phones, these modern day lynchings, we're seeing them. Otherwise, we would assume, yes, we would assume it's no longer happening. But these videos are proof that there's a lack of equality in this world. And in order for us to get there, our young people, our older people, it's harder for us to get to the older people. You know, they've lived their lives. You know, some are comfortable where they are and how they feel, and you know, it may take a little longer, but us, you know, if you're still in your 30s, your 20s and younger, we still have a moment, we still have a chance to have conversations. And everyone has to be honest, and it can't be, you know, yes, you may have a feeling about me saying you have a white privilege, but understand what I mean when I say that. Take the time to understand what that means when it comes out of my mouth. Not just being offended. At this point, we're past, in order for us to have more diversity. And I wanted to touch on this diversity in workplaces. I hear people say they have diversity inclusion programs, and what that means is that they have a Black person planning events, you know, during Black History Month. No, that's not what we're talking about. We need people who are sitting on boards. We need people who are part of decision making when it comes to you having staff and you having employees that are Black and brown. You need someone on your staff who can relate to those people's feelings. And when you don't have that, it creates this divide within workplaces. And this is what we're seeing in the world. This is what we're seeing in the world. There's a divide because it's been structured to have a divide. Right. So I really think it's a conversation. I think it's people being honest with how they feel. And it doesn't have to come from an angry place, understanding that there are people who are extremely tired at this point in their life, and it may come out very aggressive, very passionate. Doesn't mean that they're going to blow your car up or blow your house up. We're just, at this point, people are tired, and we get louder. You know, I think naturally, if you're arguing with anybody, even with a mother and her child, if you said something once, you know, we think of our parents, they said it once, calm voice, they didn't listen, you didn't listen. By the third time, your parents are probably a little louder, you know, it's not, and that child reacts because your voice changed. So I think it's education. I think it's someone says,
yeah, there's a couple comments coming in.
Someone says, Bree Joseph says, acknowledgement of the obvious, apologies. I think that's true. I think accountability and If someone says to you, this is how what you've done makes me feel, being able to say, you know what,
I'm
I didn't
sorry.
realize I was doing that, but I'm sorry,
Mhm.
but that comes with people, as you said, Kim, and I keep going back to this because it was an important thing that you said,
Mhm.
you learning,
Yeah.
you taking the time to learn. And if you take the time to learn, then when someone approaches you with something that may normally feel like an attack, you're able to discern what's actually happening, and not feel like you need to be on the defense. So I really do feel like it's education, it's acknowledgement of what is going on, whether you fully understand or not,
Mhm.
acknowledging, yeah, there's a problem here. I don't fully have the background details on the problem, but acknowledging that there's a disconnect and there's a problem. I think that's where we start. And Winnie, stop me because I keep going.
Oh, no, you're fine.
Well, and I'd like to add, just speaking up, like Winnie and I dealt with this whenever we worked together with our staff. Our staff wouldn't tell us if something was broken or they needed
Mm-hmm.
something, or there was an issue with another staff or
Mhm.
whatever. And me and Winnie would just be like, "You've got to tell us. We
Right.
are unfortunately sometimes stuck in our offices. We can't be out like in the field, or just doing the work with you
Mhm.
guys. Sometimes we were able to, but most of the time, like, we're doing so much paperwork and reports and stuff, like we don't know what you guys are doing daily, day in, day out. It just speak up, no matter what the topic is, if it's
Right.
home life, social stuff, in
Right.
the workplace, whatever. Just speak up and
Mhm.
express your feelings. Because if you
Exactly.
if
I
you just sit
agree.
there and just be like, jump to conclusions and think, oh, this is just how it is, because a
Mhm.
lot of people don't like change. And I've been such a huge proponent in every job with everybody I've ever worked with. Change is good. Like, you've
Right.
got to
It
speak
is.
up in
Right.
order for
Right.
things to change
Absolutely.
and to get better.
Mhm.
I
There's
agree.
there's a comment that I want to share. It's regarding white privilege. Funes says white privilege is just like any other privilege in his opinion, but white people sometimes get offended by that term because maybe they're not aware that they have that privilege. So here are
Mm-hmm.
some examples. US born citizens have privileges that immigrants don't have. Someone born in a rich family or even a middle class family has more privileges than someone born in a poor family, etc. So he thinks that if white privilege is looked at that way, then maybe it won't come off as an attack. And I think it's true because there's different levels of privileges. And what that essentially means is that, in certain situations, you might get a leg up where somebody else wouldn't necessarily get it.
I
Um,
agree.
and I definitely support what both of you have said, and some in our comments as well, in terms of the dialogues, the education, acknowledging other people, being willing to listen and hear where other people are coming from. I really think is very, very important.
Mhm.
Um, do you guys have any final thoughts or anything like that that you would like to share?
Just to piggyback on what Flynn has said, he's absolutely right. That's a perfect example that even me being a child of Haitian immigrants who immigrated to this country,
Mhm.
um, I wasn't always aware of what my privileges were in comparison to, just because I was US born, the
Right.
hurdles that someone who's not US born has to go through just to make it, in this country. Um, you know, we're not aware of those things, even though it should be evident to me. It's in
Mhm.
my backyard, but because I didn't see necessarily the struggle my parents had before me,
Mhm.
and I have other family members who have come to the States, and I just I see them doing so well getting here. Winnie is an example. You miss that step for a second. It's not that it's not happening. You just don't identify it. You know, you don't recognize it that way because yeah, they're doing okay. You know, Kim, you say people from your town are like, you're doing so well. They don't know the internal struggles that you had to go through to get to that point. They don't know those things. And just on the surface, because it looks so easy, we assume everyone's okay. Everyone has the perfect, the perfect version of the American dream. And it's true. It could be looked at. Privilege can be defined on so many levels. It's a great example of taking the word white out and just explaining what privilege means.
Right.
And it makes sense. And I thank you for that, Flynn, not because you're my cousin, but I thank you for that example because
a very great example.
I thank you for that because it is something that I can now take if I'm having this conversation with someone else who is not getting it because they're caught on a particular word. I can take that and say, okay, think about it this way, think about it this way. And maybe it'll trigger, maybe it'll stick. Middle class versus, upper class. Like there's a difference because of what things are available to them. And it's not because one didn't work hard and the other did. They just have different opportunities because of where they sit on the spectrum.
Right, definitely. So as we wrap up, I don't have anything further to add, unless Kim, you have any final thoughts?
Not that I can think of.
All right. Well, I do want to thank you guys again so much for coming on today. This was
Thank you for pulling my leg.
Yeah, this was such an enriching.
Not really a public speaker.
Well, I think you could have fooled me. Well, thank you guys so much. I'm gonna let you guys go. I do have some final thoughts for our viewers. So as we wrap up this conversation today, I do want to leave you guys with some further questions to consider as you work towards overcoming biases and becoming more inclusive. Here are the questions. Number 1, how many people of color do you know personally? Number 2, how much diversity is in your workplace and in your community? Number 3, there are numerous neighborhoods, towns, and cities across the US that are characteristically all white with little to no diversity. If you live in one of those communities, have you ever wondered why they're all white? Are you aware of the racial policies that were implemented specifically to keep Black and other people of color out of these communities? Number 4, do you have any neighbors who are people of color? If not, how comfortable would you be having a person of color live next door to you? And finally, where did you learn about people of color? Was it from the media? Was it from stereotypical representation seen on TV shows, movies, books, etc., while you continued living in your bubbles? Or was it from interacting with people of color and getting to know them personally? I think that doing an honest review of how you feel about these things can really help you to become more aware of some of the day-to-day struggles that people of color like myself have to endure. We will continue with this discussion next Friday via Instagram Live. So I hope that you guys will join in and continue with the conversation with us. Thank you all for tuning in today.